Hello again, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second conversation of the day, Technologies of Relations. We have already kind of sat through a lot of beautiful voices of this year's Biennale, and we're really excited for this conversation, of course, moderated by our very own Cabello. So I'm really excited to have you all here on stage. And as always, if you have any other questions about what's in the program, my name is Michelle, and you can come find me for any questions. Thank you. And with that, I'll pass it to our moderator and our panels.
Thank you, Michelle, for the introduction. Welcome to this panel titled Technologies of Relation. I've been thinking about technology and how we've separated, or rather, that we've kind of been thinking about discontinuities and not continuation of knowledge. And what I mean by that is that knowledges from, say, the rest of the world that have been used in Western science or Western industries have been kind of like somewhat separated in our way of thinking. We are not thinking about the fact that those knowledges from the rest of the world are continuing within Western knowledge systems. So I want us to kind of like think about continuity. And so that's how I'm kind of like thinking about technology and how it's moved as historically from the global south and now in the way that we find it in different forms. Today we have Karan Shrestha, all of the artists, of course, part of the Biennale, Rohini Devasher, and Dr. George Mahashe. And the panel is very simple. I will ask them a few questions, and then I will ask you to join in a conversation and ask questions yourself. And the first question is really just to introduce their practice to you in a very kind of like loose way and nothing too heavy. Karan, can you please start? Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me? Hi. So for the past decade, my practice looks. Sure. Hello.
Should maybe use mine.
Hi. Hello. Yeah, it's better. Doesn't like me, technology. Yeah, so for the past decade, my practice looks at the entangled relations of Nepal's recent history. Nepal had a 10-year a decade-long civil war from 1996 to 2006, and then it became a federal democratic republic. So my practice looks at the changes that occurred or didn't occur that was promised to the people. And so the through line, I could say that runs through the work was looking at systems and structures, be it institutional, political, social, and even economical, how it exercises control on humans, and how the control extends to soil and water as well. And so I've been working along these areas, and for the past few years, I've been making work surveying the state of water in Nepal. Rivers flow north to south in Nepal, north to south, and in school, it's incorrectly taught that it's the richest in water resource in accordance to its land size in Asia, and second in the world after Brazil, but this is incorrect. It's number 43. But this actually feeds into the dominant narrative of building more hydropower dams, and that has its other repercussions from displacing people to many other crimes and violations that actually happen. And so there is that narrative on one side, and the other is we have to buy water to drink and water to consume. In the south of Nepal, in certain areas where the population is heavily concentrated, it hasn't rained for 2 years, and people are finding it really hard to farm because they have to bore wells 500 feet below the ground, and that's really expensive. There's no government subsidies. So I started working on national parks many years back, and the other sides of the national park, and then it just went towards this work, which is the manuscript. And the manuscript first, initially, I like the format because it's an expansive format, and like water, it can take many branches. So I started looking at water systems, and I started looking at the politics of water. And while I was doing so, I was also traveling quite a bit and conversing with people. And in doing so, I also realized that, okay, on one end, it's kind of really easy to and perhaps necessary as well to criticize, analyze, and question all of these systems and the violence that comes with these systems on people and nature. But at the other end, I was also looking at how do people come together? Because for a country its size, Nepal has 6 climatic zones, and the relationship to water changes from place to place, people to people, and also with other forms of life. So I was looking at the intersection of mythology as well as livelihood. Okay, what happened?
We should just try to choose it. Guys.
There was a cracking sound, okay. Yeah. Maybe I don't need a mic.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, now it's working. All right. Yeah, I hope I haven't lost my thought. But yeah, largely looking at that, and then, where was I? Sorry.
Climatic zones.
Yeah, so I mean, of course, there is climate change, which is compounded by ecological degradation in Nepal. But then there's the other factor that is poor governance. There's the unequal distribution of wealth is very telling of the unequal distribution of water and characteristic of its poor governance. And that brings me here, looking at the various aspects of water. I think I should get on to you now.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my name is Rohini Devasher. I'm an artist and I'm an amateur astronomer. And a lot of the work looks at the sort of categories of the observer, observation, and the field or the site. And I'm interested in basically how things are looked at and how and why they are looked at. So ways of mapping, measuring, sorting, recording. And I'm also really interested in the entanglement of these categories and the sort of weirdness of the spaces that are created by the sort of spaces that are created by the entanglement of these things. So a lot of the work over the past 12, 15 years has involved extensive interviews with amateur astronomers in India, as well as field visits to observatories across the country. And I'm really interested in what draws these people, which includes myself, to the night sky. Like, what does it mean to be under the night sky, and how does this transform the way that we think about our relationship to the more than human, and what might it tell us about a sort of imagination of planetary thinking that is based on empathy and solidarity rather than extraction. So a lot of the work is about all of these things, and the work that is showing in the Biennale, the title of which is From the Dust of This Planet, is looking specifically at the complicated position of the observer. And if I start talking about the work now, it'll take me more than 5 minutes, so I'm going to stop there.
George Mahashe. I think my practice starts from a tension I experienced maybe 15 odd years ago. I proposed to go see something, And everybody kept saying, what do you mean go see? Don't you mean go document? So the tension between wanting to see versus wanting to document, or an expectation that you should document, is something that has been present in my work. And in most cases, this involved me visiting my great-grandmother a lot. At the same time, I've been working with archives. Once you go see, you eventually find yourself drawn to other documents of people that have gone to see. So that's one aspect of it. In the last sort of 5-6 years, the work has moved from the photographic, which is my background. Once a fashion photographer, has moved from photography as a document to the camera obscura, which for me, especially, it's nice to talk after you, as much as it's a tool of observation, for me it came as a break from the expectation to document, the expectation to leave a trace. So I've been interested in the camera obscura, I've been interested in its relation to dreams, and the work that you have available to you here is dealing with the question of how else do you access your own history? How else do you learn about technologies that are, old technologies that are within your culture? And in this case, it had been a query about salt and what salt is used for, its anchoring capacity, and so forth. So for me, my work has really been a movement that respects curiosity, the curiosity to just want to go and not be obsessed with wanting to have somebody else see what I have seen.
Thank you for those beautiful responses. I've picked up on a few things that you each said. So before I have a question that is kind of like divergent or diverts from what you were saying. And I wanted to kind of ask about your interest in ecological phenomena and perhaps the poetics of it. So with Karan, it's water that you're kind of like thinking with, or maybe you can say more on what the presence of water is for you as an artist. With Rohini, is the night sky, it's also light. And with George, for the camera obscura, it's salt, and also water, rain, and light, and the sun, of course. So maybe if you could speak to that, and we will just kind of like do it with Karan first.
Oh, me again?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I've been thinking about water, but I think my understanding and sensing of it is quite limited. I mean, it is something that behaves in very peculiar ways, and but I'm looking at it from as many perspectives as I can gather, really, because often it's looked at only as a resource for human consumption right now, with commodification, privatization, and consumption of water. And I'm also looking at how in many communities across Nepal, and perhaps in many other places in the world, there was a certain kind of hydrological continuity that was maintained. We had, from the 12th century to the 17th century, these taps, public taps made from stone that was called hithis, and it was a social as well as a sacred duty to make sure that the water kept running and went back into the soil, because it belonged to all other forms of life. And there was particular kind of tradition that was practiced, and that has it's not discontinued, but it's changed largely, and and also looking at so many other narratives centered around water, but water in particular as an element I'm too limited in my understanding, so I can only attempt to approach it from different points.
Yeah, I might extend that a little bit to maybe thinking of the ecology, not just of the night sky, but even of the sort of planetary a little bit, if we come back to this work. Because, for instance, the title, From the Dust of This Planet, draws from this amazing book by Eugene Thacker, philosopher, In the Dust of This Planet, where he reads horror as philosophy. And he sort of describes the sort of planetary as a kind of, nested matryoshka dolls of imaginations of the planetary, right? So you've got the world, which we read into, that we make sense of, that we, that feeds back, etc. And then you've got the earth, which is a little bit extended. And then you've got the planet, which he describes it as kind of at the limit of comprehension. It's at the, sort of the boundary of the unknowable, which almost extends into the indifferent, into horror. And I'm interested in this kind of the in and taking the in to the from. So in the dust of this planet, when you change it to from the dust of this planet, and you say maybe those ends of representation are not endpoints, and if they are portals or sort of, possibilities of new ways of meaning making and sense making and thinking about, the entanglement of all of this. So that's really where the work sort of began. So basically, over the 4 acts, we draw from science fiction, from non-Western cosmologies, from quantum mechanics, from quantum cosmology, and also from lived amateur astronomical observations to destabilize the position of the observer. So now you say actually that maybe every observation creates a world, every observer is already entangled deeply in what they are making sense of, and that maybe the planet is looking back. So the planet then re-emerges as kind of a figure of both horror as well as wonder, but it sort of shape-shifts, it becomes a compound lens, it becomes like a sort of an entity, but also it is no longer mute, it is no longer inert. So, I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah.
I think for me, the question reminds me of what I didn't say. What I didn't say about my other practice, or my real practice lately, storytelling. For me, I've been telling stories about Balobedu, and it's a long story. Balobedu are people in northeastern Southern Africa. They're famous rainmakers, and one of the most compelling sort of lead into chasing rainmakers came with a person in a nature reserve that told me how whenever they would be observing, rangers watching the border. South Africa, I come from an area that borders Zimbabwe, Mozambique, it's quite a very busy place. They would say every now and then you would see a herd of buffalo crossing. And of course, the herd of buffalo is expected. But later on, they would look on the ground and they would see footprints of humans, which means that an image had passed in front of them that was not the image that they were expecting. And it became a story about the experts that lead these men, and it also includes crossing waters where even animals can see the people. So for me, these stories of rainmakers, stories of magicians ferrying humans, images of things that are nearby but not here, have also been interesting. And then at some point, when I was looking for rainmakers, one guy says to me, if you want to find, this, look to mafadi, which is salt, which for me is also another little tangent. So, but for me, I think to answer your question, the ecological is an image. It's a question of, we have images of water, we have images of forests, we have images of people moving, we have ideas of what a rainmaker looks like, etc., etc. So for me, I think I'm really interested in the lens that's possible to comprehend the ecological. And of course, me studying and chasing Balobedu is rooted in Mujaji, who in most cases people described her as possessing Pandora's box. This is a person that presides over the area that I'm interested in. Who people describe as trying to approach her village. You could be engulfed in a cloud of mist that stretches, for days. Or you could just be on a clear day, thunder, and then it rains. So for me, these images are interesting because they are images of nature, but they are also apparitions, fabrications, etc., etc.
I must wait. Okay, thank you for those answers. I mean, I've been making notes and really interested in kind of like how you take a lot of information. I think for Karan, you were talking about knowledge from Nepal around water. I've also seen that you're also now thinking about like climate change and how science is dealing with climate change in relation, and also how your work does kind of like, I mean, I could sense that you were talking about really important social issues, but when you see the work, that isn't quite what you would read. It's not, I mean, George already talked about like documentation. In this particular work, it's not a documentation of the climate change that is happening. So I was interested in asking around the poetics and how you deal with, one, the knowledge that you're drawing from, the different types of knowledges, and how that translates into the work.
I think I touched upon it when I was talking about the manuscript, which holds many different facets. It's an ongoing work since 22, and any other aspects that speak to climate change. I mean, it's hard to speak about ecology without it's enmeshed in the social as well as the economics and certain hierarchies that have been pre-existing for a while, and who's at the receiving end of it. And yeah, so there are these. I mean, for example, in the manuscript, which is not over here, but there's one contribution which talks about GLOFs, which are glacial lake outburst floods, and they have been because the snow melt has been quite drastic over the past 2 decades, and we have to rely on scientific systems to actually be able to give precautionary measures to certain villages that are placed in the high mountains to evacuate, but that's still not working. And recently, in last year in July, there was like a village was washed away because of a flash glacial lake outburst flood. And in other parts, when when we talk about climate change, of course, so much of what I mentioned earlier about the unequal distribution of wealth and water is also, there's so much untreated waste that actually goes into the water. And my work does touch upon all the microbacteria that are found in water. Around almost 6,500 children die every year due to waterborne diseases in Nepal. And of course, there's so much waste that's thrown around. And if you look at the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which transmits dengue and Zika. These are found largely in people storing water because they cannot access water. So I think what I'm trying to get at is climate change has to be seen in a more broader lens, where it has intersections with society as well as economy and politics, another aspect, which I do try to touch upon. And I think the work takes various manifestations in different places. And so I guess you can approach it in different ways. So it is there, and maybe it's overlooked sometimes.
I think I can kind of ask the same for you, Rohini. In your work, and in this work in particular, there are knowledges from long time ago. I don't even remember the dates. And there's also knowledge from Western science, or maybe let's call it science, people who are trained. And then there's, of course, amateur astronomers who, in terms of the experience that they have, I don't even know if it can be called a hobby if somebody has been looking at something for 40 years, right? So I'm interested in the accumulation of knowledge as well, that like the work talks about. So maybe if you can speak to that, like how you gather all of these.
That's a great question. I think it's different registers of it. I feel like, on one hand, there's the accumulation of the actual material, which also in a way brings in, this idea of lenses and technologies. So for instance, the planet is shot using a fisheye lens. I was on a oil tanker and I did a 26-day residency. So every morning and every night I would record sunrise and sunset from the bridge of the ship with a 360-degree lens. And when you have no light pollution and you're recording the sky, then you have this amazing moment where you suddenly see the sky as the earth becomes sort of transformed into this sort of celestial body, which it is. But it's this weird moment of a mirroring, but also it's almost vertigo-inducing, So on one hand, there was that sort of sense of the planetary, which then came in with Hacker's visualization of this kind of horror philosophy. But coming back to the idea of, this sort of knowledge when we come through, if you think about just the idea of the observer, when you think about lived amateur astronomical observation, I don't think that they're amateurs at all. I don't know if the word is still used because they don't have professional training, but these are people who have extreme specifications for what they do. They are extremely, rigorous and for instance, Akash, who's one of the voices in the 4th chapter of the work, the way that he describes the sort of threshold between vision and hallucination, this is meta, this is stuff that could be theory as well. And I think what's very important about this community, which is one of the reasons why I'm so interested in them and why I continue to work with them, is they also make a case for citizen science, for the idea that you can have data with a small d. The fact that you can, sort of make a stake to your part of the sky. The fact that the sky is so political that we have almost 40,000 satellites being sent into space that are interrupting everything from, radio astronomers to, just sky watching. And the fact that this can happen with no conversation, but amateur astronomers sort of go out with their sidewalk astronomy and, sorry, I'm going off tangent here. But, when you think about the observer from this perspective, and then when you think about quantum mechanics and you think about quantum cosmology, and when you think then about how complicated it becomes when you ask, who is the observer? When you are yourself part of the system. And there's a wonderful, I think he's a philosopher, Loganayagam from the International Center for Theoretical Sciences in Bengaluru. And he has a lovely sort of, section where he talks about, if you are yourself part of the system, then maybe every observation is actually an introspection. So then you ask, what does observation even mean? Is it an introspection? Is it an interaction? Is it a measurement? So yeah, I feel like these are all sort of things that are sort of like a web. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, but it's like a backward jigsaw puzzle, if that helps.
Yeah, that helps. Thank you. What you said right now was also something that I kind of noted. This notion that especially study of, let's call it the unknown, is actually an introspection. Because I've always wondered, especially when you look at documentary of animals, there's always this idea that this animal is making us see ourselves. We are seeing ourselves. There's always like this not self-importance, but like we need everything. Every study is about knowing us. And this was very interesting when I was thinking about, when I saw your work, that actually I hadn't thought about it in relation to astronomy, that when we are going into space or thinking about space, we're actually thinking about ourselves still. We do that with like primates. It's like an ape can't be an ape. It is an ape because it shows us, right? So anyways, I'm now getting too excited. I'm gonna ask George, also similar, because with your work, there's of course, which I think we can call it an obsession with Balobedu, and also an interest in, I'm gonna ask you about telluric interference, because when you were in Geneva, there was this interest in how the Lobedu were seeing telluric, or using even telluric interference, and how the science was thinking about it. So if you can speak to those knowledge systems.
Yeah. I mean, I think... Hello? Oh. I think I got really excited when you were saying data with a small d, right? And maybe before I get to the question, for me, that moment in Geneva, where I spent 3 months talking with exoplanet hunters who were looking for a planet like ours, what became clear there was their sort of acceptance that they don't have enough data, but also an understanding that indigenous communities, amateur communities, if you have, if you use that word, have much more data from observing in multiplicity over a very long period of time. So for me, I think that's something that's really exciting. So within the question of telluric interference, of course, Balobedu are rainmakers. There are many ways to make rain. The first thing they tell you is rain comes whether, rain comes. It's a question of what kind of rain will come. And one of the processes that Balobedu use, they build these forests, or they have access to these forests, giant cycad trees that produce quite a thick layer of moisture. When you're observing the sky or the night sky from these dense moisture pockets, you're able to see the stars in different ways, how a star flickers, the color that it flickers. That information they would be able to use to say, okay, cool, if this is happening, this means this means this year it's not worth using rain medicine. This means this year we shouldn't make rain, etc., etc. The funny thing was that the exoplanet hunters were using, or rather they were finding that as a problem. In a sense that for them to observe the night sky, you need to eliminate this glare, this interference that's happening. So for me, I mean, now the question has run away because it's always dangerous to talk about Balobedu with me, because then it becomes a long story. Anyway, let me... Yeah, and unless you recast the question, I think I got excited in the thought.
The question was around the collision between, say, Lobedu knowledge systems and scientific knowledge.
Yeah. No, I mean, in that case, it is exactly this small d question. It's a reality that the formal world knows its limits in terms of what it can know and how long it's been knowing. So for me, it's really a question about how do you extend time in the process of knowing. And I think for me, something that's worth mentioning, in case I forget to mention it, for the work that is up at the moment, the big question was about how do I come to know Mafadi? I was told if I want to understand rainmaking, I need to understand Mafadi. In order to make the work, one of the first things that came was an insistence that the type of research or the type of researcher that is able to research Mafadi is not me. So I had to rely on a young woman, Lebu, and Tato, who could then communicate and commune with older women from Baleni, where it's a salt mine in my hometown. So for me, it is also that question of understanding that these long histories also have access roots. Yes, I will stop.
Thank you for that. It's now time, very short talk, so it's now time for me to ask you to join the conversation. So if you have any questions, please do join us.
And then reflect it in scale. I can repeat that question.
You got it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
The idea of scale.
The scale, yeah.
Yeah, Joel.
Scale in terms of in yours, it's water.
Yeah.
Like it's such a
Like manuscript. Like how you take big ideas and make them smaller, how you take very personal ideas, like this idea of seeing and reflect that in a physical, tangible way.
Yeah. I don't think I'm focusing as much on seeing rather than sensing. I don't know if I have any divisions between big ideas and small ideas. I don't know where these definitions or bifurcations lie, really. And I think a lot of times things make sense to me only after I make them. And so it'll be incorrect for me to say that I am going into a work knowing everything. I don't. The work teaches me as well. And I like the format of the manuscript because it also unfolds a bit by bit. And it's also perhaps in my relationality and understanding that it is also the course of water that moves through streams, through rivers. Like it changes it in scale by itself. And I can only attempt to unravel with it, really, and get at what I can get at.
I think for me, there are two ends of that. So I did a piece which I was with it was called Shadow Walkers. So it was interviews with eclipse chasers, or people who have spent their lives trying to stand in the shadow of the moon. And there I knew that it could not be image. It had to be just voice. So it's just a sound piece where I invite people for like an evening of collective listening. And you sort of mimic the actions of amateur astronomers world over, and you just listen to voices of people who are describing what it is. So that's one way of sort of dealing with the scale. With this work, it was actually, I remember as a kid lying on my rooftop and just staring up at the sky. And there's this, it's actually that script in the first part of the work where you feel like, gravity is loosening its hold on you and you feel like you're going to fall or fly into the sky. So then it felt like, for this work at least, I needed it to be big. I wanted it to be of a scale, and hence the slight tilt as well, so that you really feel like you're in the sky. Yeah, so those two things.
I think for me it's practice and time. I think if we learn anything from the things that work in the histories that one studies is only time really can deal with scale. So for me, I've been telling the same story for over 20 years. Telling a story that I've known for almost 40 years. So it's not a question of reducing, but a question of getting comfortable with time and maintaining a practice of doing. If it's seeing, continue to see. And at some point, what you see makes sense, sometimes it doesn't, but you continue.
Other questions? Comments?
Hi, thank you all. So the question's still forming in my head, so if it doesn't make sense, I apologize. But I'll break it into 3 parts. So from the geographies you all come from, some of the information points and subject matter you're dealing with, in the history of these places was more common knowledge, we can say. So in the topic of the spiritual value of water that played a role in how it was then preserved and cared for, or astronomy as something that played a role in everyday life, or the ritual around rain. Do you think, or do you feel in any way that this gift to pursue it has been dropped on you in some way to play a role, still forming, or a duty in reconnecting the people of the lands that you come from with a deeper knowledge that actually plays a role in helping them to redo what used to happen, that's going to play a role in water, connection to what's outside, generation of rain. It's almost like we don't need new systems because there's something already there. It might not make sense. But do you feel some sense of duty to document and share and maybe reconnect?
I don't know if I would use the word duty so much, but I feel definitely, if you just look at, for instance, the loss of the night sky, right? The fact that in Delhi you can't see the night sky. It's so light polluted. When I joined the amateur astronomers 20 years ago, you could still hold observations in the middle of the city. Now for low threshold skies, which means not very dark skies, you have to go 4 hours away. So if it's a question of that kind of, bringing people, it's not even a loss that I think we're recognizing, what would it mean to grow up without the stars? So something like that, I don't know, but maybe that is a sense of duty, or at least a sense of drive, I suppose. I don't know, I don't like the word duty so much, but I see where you're going. Yes, thank you for the question.
Thanks.
For me, I would say conscripted. Definitely feel conscripted. Yeah.
Okay. No, don't look at the time. Time is.
Do you want me to
Relative.
Time is relative.
Do you want me to ask?
Yes, if you have
Yeah, no, I would second that. I don't like the word duty or responsibility. And I think I don't have a clear position on this, really. I often feel sometimes that what does tradition mean? And perhaps something has existed for a very long time is because it has worked. There's a functionality to it. But I am not nostalgic about it, and it's not something that needs to be promoted in any way. Of course, we can find new ways to do things, and I think it would be really pompous if I was like saying that I have the duty to talk about water and share the story. No, I don't feel that. I think often I feel the opposite. In fact, I feel so helpless. That's why I make art. And I can't actively make a difference in reality, so I maybe pursue some kind of beauty.
Thank you. One last question.
I'm quite fascinated, and it has been touched upon for several times, the notion of time. I'm quite fascinated in the work of all three of you here. From my side, the other side, we have been speaking about, and it's obvious that research needs time. You need to continue practice. There's a manuscript that continues to be written. But on the other hand, there's also, you also have the same kind of, as a kind of a limit, a receding limit. You have this on behalf of the visitor. And what is for me in all of these works, there is a kind of tension to that, or kind of, is it a conscious tension? For example, the salt that is invisible but important, so it's there, but people may not see it. There is a video that is so long that you can enter a snippet and then another one, and then in the end you recede and you hang into it. There is a very generous short offer. In a certain way, there's always kind of short offers, the idea of an image, and then you can recede into a kind of depth, like in the manuscript. Is that something we should think about more, about art as a presentation in a biennale like this, as being both a moment and a possibility of going deeper into time?
Yes, I will ask that you answer briefly.
No, I mean, for me, I think it's inevitable. Yeah, I do what I do, and it happens how it happens. And once I stop trying to control that, yeah. So it is deliberate, but it is what it is.
It is a kind of polarity, because you take care of both elements. You give an offer to whomever passes by, but you also have an offer in a kind of deeper time that continues to be there.
Yes, no. I think.
I think it's also sort of reflective of the experience we have of the making of the work as well, right? So, for instance, I think a lot of my work asks you to sort of slow down and pay attention, because I think also the nature of the work is, if it's not representative of an experience, but if it's trying to at least, not even embody it, but channel the experience, then it would require you to sort of have a different sense of time. And I think I love that, actually. I like your framing of this, that it sort of offers you both. You could choose to dip your toes in, or you could choose to sort of immerse and stay. Yeah, both.
What do I say? Yeah, I mean, because I've made works that are very long, as well as the manuscript is kind of short. I think so people have very short attention span. But yeah, sometimes it's great to work with limitations and restrictions. I think there's no music without restriction, and so it's that kind of thing where you use a very short format to be able to speak, perhaps in layers, and sometimes the durational pieces work where you can just meander and get lost in it.
Sadly, we have to end. Thank you so much for the questions, for the attention. It's been lovely. Thank you, Karan, Rohini, George. Have a nice day, the rest of it. Stay and listen to more artists. Thank you.